I was about 2½, and I was given a package of radish seed and shown how to grow them. And in a few weeks, I had a crop. And I also had the first compliment in memory. And I decided I would do more gardening. People ask about a master plan, and I said, we don't have one. It's a vision, and a lot of it I dream of at night. That's Toshiko Takaezu, who was America's most famous potter. It has a wonderful sound. It's sort of our doorbell. The dome is everyone's favorite. It's become our icon here at LongHouse. Children love it. I was flying over Celtic ring forts in Ireland, and they looked very much like this, and I decided this would make a great amphitheater. Edward Albee has read poetry and drama here, and Bill T. Jones did dancing. We had all kinds of different performances. This is Maya Yagi from Kyoto, and she does sculpture for us, including this wonderful pylon.
Thank you, everyone.
Banzai!
40 years ago, when I first bought this land, I started clearing out deciduous trees. This was second growth. They made too much shade in the summer and were colorless in winter. I was every year in Japan, where the gardens are as good in winter as they are in summer because of so many evergreens, trees and shrubs, and how to make that conversion. Because I wanted this to be a year-round garden, and that did help. This land had been, in the 18th century, farmed, and these Connecticut farmers would have normally used rocks between the fields, but they don't have rocks here. So they use earth bermed up, and that's where the hedges are now. The reason sculpture is better outdoors than in is because of the light and the changing light and the changing seasons and the contrast, the tension between the hard forms and the softness of foliage. And we try to find where sculpture would look best, show off best, be in better contrast. And we have 60 pieces, about 20 of them are new each year. We're looking at Solowit. Children call it a magical city. They have all sorts of dreams of what it might be. We love the colors. The fact that they're matte black instead of the usual shiny red is very popular with us. Many of our plants here were gifts from Rockefeller Center, and there are 30 of these European vestigiate hornbeams. This is Willem de Kooning's period. He worked in these large bronzes. He molded the models in his hands originally and then cast them in bronze. This tree is a freak. It should be a tall tree in the Atlas Mountains, but this one was found all hovered over in France in the 19th century.
I've known Jack Larsen a very long time, maybe close to 50 years. We moved out here and had a place called Roundhouse, which was a series of African dwellings.
My idea, after living in fairly small spaces in my African roundhouses, was to get more space, and space for art and more space for people, more light. And this is Peter's Pond, which is full of lotus. We have both yellow and white water lilies that bloom for several months. LongHouse. The inspiration was Ise Shrine in Japan, which I thought was the most beautiful building in the world. It's a 7th century Shinto architecture. I've always been a Japanophile. Partly it was the Northwest culture. Our artists were Japanophiles, and so were our architects. There's a 65-foot long skylight at the top, and that's what produces this wonderful light.
And upstairs here at LongHouse, it's filled with that wonderful borderline between craft and art, or art that was not made as art, but was made as craft.
We have the second largest collection of Orton Esrick here. He was the most important furniture maker in America in the 20th century.
This is a Chihuly?
Yeah, It's from my birthday last year. And the baskets behind, the 3 of them, are probably the best piece he's done. And it was a thank you for arranging a show at Palais de Louvre in Paris. Dale and I both studied interior architecture in Seattle at the University of Washington.
Oh, okay.
He had left class to learn to become a weaver in his senior year, as I had. He was trying to weave glass, not very successfully.
Yeah.
I said, if you're interested in glass, learn how to blow glass. Then he wanted to start a glass school in Seattle with $2,000. And I said, let's work together. And I started Pilchuck.
Pilchuck, yeah.
It's become a glass center.
Right, I
worldwide.
visited that a couple of years ago.
Look how it's zipping through there, huh?
You can see all of these have gone into the same mold, but yet, with the exception of this one, no two are alike. And no two are alike.
This is Tumbling Woman. It was a sculpture I made in response to the tragedy of 9/11. And I chose tumbling, which is more of a horizontal kind of motion. Something that feels more about being unweighted and unanchored, uncentered, like sagebrush.
To make these concrete ones, I'd start with reinforcing rod, the size that I wanted the ball to be, and I would draw a circle on the driveway and bend the rod to fit the circle. And then I'd do a whole pile of them and then weld them together to make circles. I like to weld, not sew. And then I would mix the concrete and slather it on. And I always did it all myself.
And you're still doing it?
Those are the understructure that go under the concrete ones.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so they're naked.
The multi-leveled meaning of conductor, from conductor of electricity or the conductor of the orchestra is the flow of the music and the timing of the music. And so that idea of water flowing and energy flowing and notes flowing, some musical kind of level of interpretation.
It was very, very strong.
Thank you.
In a garden, its color and its texture and form, it dies or it grows. It's almost like choreography, slow motion. When I was 10, I started gardening for money. I already worked at home on our small gardens, but I worked for neighbors and 25 cents an hour. Moved things around and took things out and so on. The chief gardener and I make a great team. I point and he cuts. Our motto here is elegance usually derives from subtraction. It's not what you add, it's what you take away that brings out beauty.
Jack grew up in Seattle. His father was a contractor, a building contractor, so he had an early interest in architecture and the built environment.
Well, when I was 6, I had a fairy godmother across the alley who didn't have a child, but she gave me a globe and a world map, 7 an atlas, and so she really gave me the world, then a stamp collection to sort of put it all together. So I was schooled in foreign countries. It was my world, and I got to a lot of it.
I love the story of Jack coming to New York City and interviewing for a job in a textiles company. And of course, there wasn't the right fit because Jack had the vision. At the age of 25, he started his company. And soon after that, it was the international resource for the finest in textile work.
I was so lucky. In '52, I was invited to Haiti to work with some people that to make little tin oil lamps. They were rolling this wild cotton on their thighs and making a roving for the wick. And a French painter said, hey, you're making a yarn. So if you make a yarn, you could weave. And I was brought down to help them with color and a market and dye stuffs and so on. And it was very successful. And so pretty soon we were in Morocco and Colombia and Mexico and Swaziland. But I was always on a mission and working with interesting people. I was almost never a tourist. Didn't want to be. It's pretty boring.
He was involved with a lot of the leading architects of the time and really contextualizing and helping the architecture, because this was architecture that often was very minimal, didn't have a lot of great acoustical properties. This was the time of glass facades. So it was important to have that light filter into the building. So with his textiles, they were absolutely necessary to complete the architecture.
Lever House was the first high-rise going up in America after the war. The whole ground floor is glass boxes, and they needed a fabric in there to create some interest and would I do it? I was asked to do a curtain for an iconic bank in Philadelphia that had 100 feet drop. And what could I do that would not sag? And we invented this technique. It cannot stretch, and it won't burn, and it won't fade, and it won't soil. It solved the problem of glass buildings.
He was working with Edward Larrabee Barnes, involved in Haystack Mountain School, and actually had Ed Barnes selected as the architect for Haystack. He also did textiles for the Unitarian Church, designed by Louis Kahn. His neutral palettes softened the architecture and blended well.
It was all concrete walls with no windows. The floor was stone and the sound was impossible. And could I solve that? Louis wanted to see how we were doing it, why we were doing it, and he would come over to watch us weave samples. He was a charming client.
Probably his most famous project was Falling Water, doing all of the interior upholstery fabrics. Everything was integrated with the architecture.
The sensitivity to texture and form and color. I've learned more from the garden for fabrics than I have fabrics for the garden. I noticed the red-leafed maples and such were really red and green at the same time. And could I do that in textiles? And it worked wonderfully well in both fabrics and in carpets. It had a Renaissance quality that I'd never achieved before.
Art of life, we need open space. And at the same time, the frame for the sculpture would be this nature. People can sit and contemplate life and decide which stage they are at the present moment. Somehow this place actually spoke to us.
Yoko Ono's Play It by Trust. It's a game of peace and not war, because there's no distinction between one's queen and another.
LongHouse Reserve is a portrait of Jack Lenor Larsen. It integrates all of his interests, not least the educational programming. He's really educating the next generations of artists, designers, weavers, collectors, writers. All of these people will look upon LongHouse Reserve as incredibly important in what they do next.
We choose to perform this piece, Shenandoah, at the LongHouse because of the serene feeling of the sound. The melody and harmony blending together paints a vision of enjoying the beautiful nature at the LongHouse.
We see, we greet, we teach, we educate about 2,500 school children here every year.
We are awarding our first 3 creative scholarships. It's the crowning glory of our 25th year to be able to do this.
I think it's a really beautiful place. A lot of inspirations here.
Everything can be an art form, and we try to get people to think of that. It's not just something you go to on Saturday at a museum. It's what makes life wonderful.
What's so extraordinary about Jack Lenor Larsen is he lives and breathes his philosophy. People talk about Jack as a master craftsman, a master of textiles, a master collector, a master landscaper. I like to just say Jack is the master.